welcome to our January webinar. If you're new to connecting with PROergonomics, we do one free monthly webinar every single month. We change the topic all the time. Sometimes you get some office things, sometimes you get some industrial things, sometimes more municipality focused. It really sort of does vary depending on what we're doing that month or a question that a client has posed. We try to vary it up. You may have been online on our website and noticed that we haven't posted the rest of our webinars yet for this year. That should be finalized hopefully this week, and you'll see those, pardon me, up online. And you're welcome, obviously, to register for as many or as few as are relevant to you and your industry. Pardon me. So what we're focusing on today is, what does ergonomic equipment really mean? I've taken a fairly office-focused approach to this today because I think that speaks to everyone who's on the line, but you can certainly apply the questions and the discussion that we're going to have to pretty much any product. So if you're in an industry that uses some sort of deburring tool, right, that has a vibrate, it's got some sort of abrasive on the end, some of the questions that we're going to ask today would apply in that industry as well. You just need to think about them a little differently and obviously apply them a little differently. And you're going to ask some additional questions likely as well. But the question really sort of comes back to, what does this term ergonomic really mean? And how do we figure out how to apply this in our workplaces? Because it is a bit of a minefield when you get out there trying to figure out what is actually ergonomic, what's going to work for you, what does that term mean, and we're going to try and demystify that a little bit today. So I want to start by talking just very, very briefly about musculoskeletal disorders. If you're on with us today, likely you already know what we're talking about here, but musculoskeletal disorders are those wear and tear injuries. They're things that occur over weeks, months, likely years. You hear a lot of people say, well, I've been doing this way for a long time and I've never had a problem before. Well, a musculoskeletal disorder is exactly that. You've been doing it exactly the same way for a long time, and it probably wasn't the healthiest way. And what happened is that your body was able to do it for a while, and all of a sudden it just started to break down. Your body had started to rebel against this terrible posture that you've been in, or the excessive force that you've been using, or the amount of repetition that you've had to do, or a combination of all of those things. And what it creates is is ultimately a nagging, often nagging injury that takes some time to repair and fix. But the first step is to change the way that you work, right? If the workplace is the thing that's causing it, you need to make sure that you're taking time to make sure that your workplace properly fits you, that the equipment that you're using, the workstation layout and setup, if those don't fit you, then you are likely to continue experiencing that discomfort because ultimately you haven't addressed the root cause of the problem. That's really sort of the basics of what a musculoskeletal disorder is. I'm assuming many of you are already on board with that, having joined us this morning, but just to make sure we're all on the same page. So an injury of the musculoskeletal system, it could occur to any of these areas of the body, right? We're talking about nerves, tendons, muscles, joints, spinal discs, and they've had all kinds of names over the years. They've been called repetitive strain injuries. They've been called cumulative trauma disorders, so RSI or CTD. Sprains and strains is a more general term we see often. They've also been occupational overuse syndromes. There's been a whole multitude of names to these. In Ontario specifically, if you are, not everyone online today I don't think is in Ontario, but if you are in Ontario specifically, the language has sort of moved to this term musculoskeletal disorder because it takes some of the, you'll notice in sort of repetitive strain and cumulative trauma implies that there is a repetitious element to these injuries. And in many cases there is, but there also may not be, right? It doesn't have to be about repetition. It can be about sustained posture. It can be about, it can happen in a one-time injury. Like a one-time injury can happen because you were lifting something that was too heavy and it was in an awkward location, which isn't about repetition, but still can be an MSD. So essentially in Ontario, they've moved to this sort of more blanket term, musculoskeletal disorder. So that's the one that you will hear us, if you've worked, listened to us do a presentation before, you'll hear us use that term MSD, but it really means all of these things as you would potentially know them by. So symptoms of MSDs, no surprise, all kinds of different things, right? Your body basically tells you that something is wrong. And it tells you that in many different ways, depending on your body, depending on pre-existing injuries, depending on what type of issue you're having currently. What you hear primarily, sort of number one, is pain and discomfort are sort of pretty common things that people are reporting. And then from there, you get a whole multitude of other things, right? People get swelling, they get redness, they get numbness, tingling, especially, pins and needles, especially when it's affecting a nerve, for example. Range of motion becomes problematic, depending on what area of the body it is. Muscle stiffness, or joint stiffness, muscle tightness, right? All these things are potential issues or things your body will tell you that are sort of indicating that you might be experiencing some sort of MSD. So this can happen in the office, it can happen in industry, really anywhere that you're doing work, you are potentially being exposed to a musculoskeletal disorder, and this is some of the things your body might be telling you. So what I want to focus on today is this term ergonomics, right? When something says it is ergonomic, what does that mean? And how do I know that it really is ergonomic? How do I know to apply that information or use that in sort of my purchasing elements? So what does it really mean to be ergonomic? So when we use that term, ergonomics technically is a discipline, right? So when something is ergonomic, in theory, right, it is about the last sentence in my description there. It's about optimizing human well-being and overall system performance. And that is done by a proper interaction between the person that's doing the job and the elements of the system, which in this case is the equipment, right? So when we're looking at a piece of equipment that is quote unquote ergonomic, we're looking for how it changes or improves the way the person uses that piece of equipment. So how does it impact someone's body posture? How does it impact the force that someone has to apply? How does it impact the repetition that they may have to do? How does it reduce the amount of contact stress that they experience, right? How does it impact them in some way that is positive, that's going to make this product ergonomic, in quotes, right? And that's really the question that we're trying to address on any time you're looking for any kind of product. You want to make sure that it addresses your individual needs for you as a person and your employees' needs if you're looking to purchase for other individuals, right? We need that product or that equipment to improve the interaction between me and the work that I do, right? Make it easier in some way. And that's really what that term ergonomic ultimately is going to mean when we're looking about equipment, is that it makes this job or this task easier for the person in some way, improving posture, force, reducing repetition, whatever that may be. So we know that ergonomics is just fitting the work to the worker, right? And really we can't do it the other way around, right? I don't stretch, I don't get taller, I don't get shorter. Well, I do get a little shorter over time, but hopefully not very much shorter. I'm certainly not getting taller anytime soon, right? And so my size and shape is not going to change. So ultimately the products that we're providing are going to change the work to make it fit the worker, right? And that's where our ergonomic equipment comes into play. Okay, so what makes equipment quote unquote ergonomic? I've got a whole bunch of pictures here just to get you sort of started, right? Again, I told you I focused primarily on office because I felt like that was the easiest one for everybody to understand, but this conversation can apply to anything. So when you look at the pictures in the top left corner, right, of the two different chairs, both of these have the word ergonomic in their description, right? That both of them have the word ergonomic in their description. If anybody is willing to, can anybody sort of throw an answer to a question back here, put a question or pose a comment in the question box? What makes one of those chairs better than the other? Why would one, yes, they're both labeled ergonomic, but why would I choose one of those chairs over the other? Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I'm getting, my first response is one has a lot more adjustability. That alone is a good example of what makes a chair ergonomic, right? Is that it ultimately we're looking for improved fit, right? We want to improve posture for a person who is working at the computer. We do that by giving them more adjustability, more ways to fit the chair to their body size and shape. Obviously, the chair on the right has a whole lot more paddles. The armrests go up and down. There's variability in the backrest. The chair on the left has very limited adjustability. It's going to go up and down. It's going to probably rock and not rock. This one, I don't think the armrests adjust, but they could. In some of these, they do, right? But there is a very big difference between the two. Now, the interesting part about this is that that's not to say that the chair on the left doesn't work perfectly for someone, right? It probably does. In fact, it likely does work exactly the way it should for someone. Someone is going to be the exact right size and shape to make this work for them, right? And so ultimately, what happens is that I can't say that the chair on the left isn't ergonomic either. What it isn't adjustable to multiple people. But will it fit someone? Yes, it will fit someone. But if you're looking for a chair that's going to fit a whole bunch of people in your office, it's not the answer, right? Because it can't be adjusted to everybody else. All my responses are, I think, the same. Lots of adjustments. Chair on the right is definitely more adjustable. I totally agree. Okay, so let's take a quick look. We'll skip down and look at mice, right? So what makes one of these mice more ergonomic than the other? Because all these have the same ergonomic, shows up in the description for all of these kind of mice. So a standard mouse, the one at the top left, the one at the top right is a vertical mouse, and the one on the bottom in the middle is a roller mouse. What sort of it makes any of these, you can choose one, what makes any of these ergonomic, quote unquote? Awesome. So first one says the vertical mouse keeps your wrist in a neutral position. So this is the one on the top right there. You can see sort of the picture of the person with their hand. It changes the wrist position. So it's actually more about your elbow than it is about your wrist, right? It actually just turns your hand to a more handshake position, which ultimately impacts sort of your elbow even more than it does your wrist. And the same thing, wrist position is better in the upper right. I totally agree. So it's an interesting. I'm not going to say that not all of these aren't ergonomic, right? That there is a time and a place for each one of these. Some people don't need the handshake position that is possible in the top right, the vertical mouse, right? The next comment here is that the roller mouse, which is the one in the bottom in the middle, keeps your arms straight in front of you. Yes, typically when people are working with a standard keyboard, your mouse is actually kind of far away from you, right? That your number pad gets in the way and then your mouse ends up outside of your body. The roller mouse changes that because it goes in front of the actual keyboard, in front of the space bar, and it keeps those arms right in front of you. It also has some other cool benefits. It allows you to switch hands, so you can use your left hand and your right hand as you desire, and it has some other hotkeys and things built into it. So it has some neat properties too, but isn't necessarily the right fit for everyone, right? So it's an interesting example. Someone's asking who manufactures the roller mouse. The roller mouse is actually manufactured by Contour, Contour. There's multiple different versions of this one. This is the newest, the roller mouse red, but there are several different roller mouse frees and other things that have different features. And it's a very different style of mouse. It's got some really cool features. It also has a bit of a steep learning curve because it's not like what you're used to. All right, so all of these products have the word ergonomic in the description. I'm not going to get into the other ones in particular yet. We'll talk about them a little bit later. But every one of these, when you look them up on Staples or Brandon Toy or Amazon or wherever you go to look at your office equipment, every one of these products claims to be ergonomic, right? And we know some are better than others and some have different features than others. But how do we start to decipher what that term really means when every product that's out there has the word ergonomic? Hence my first problem. Right? I went on Staples yesterday when I was doing this webinar, prepping the webinar, and I typed in the word ergonomic out of interest to see exactly what I would get. And you will notice that the term ergonomic brings up 2,625 items, including all kinds of crazy things. I didn't even take pictures of everything that was on there. You get the standard things you would expect, like there are ergonomic chairs, there are ergonomic keyboard trays, ergonomic mice, and and keyboards and whatnot, sort of standard office equipment, all with the term ergonomic thrown in there somewhere. But there was also a whole gamut of other products that claim to be ergonomic. Staplers, for example, there was all kinds of staplers that claim they have a more ergonomic grip. Okay, maybe they do, maybe they don't. The most ergonomic stapler out there is probably one that's automatic, that you don't actually have to apply any force to, right? And so it was really interesting to see the whole variety of products that have this claim on them. And that's just doing one quick search on Staples' website. It was a little bit crazy to see over 2,500 items claiming to be ergonomic. So that creates a huge problem for us, right? Is that we get a lot of questions. In fact, I was on vacation last week, and I had 3 questions that one of my colleagues answered from different clients about products. Like, okay, I'm having this issue with a chair. I'm wondering what chair you might recommend. I've been online, and I'm not sure which one to choose. There's too many options. And we hear that kind of stuff a lot, right? That somebody's looking for a new mouse, but they don't know which one to pick. And part of the reason for that is that there is 2,500 items online that claim to be ergonomic. So if you're looking for an ergonomic mouse or an ergonomic keyboard or an ergonomic anything, when you throw that word in there, you're going to get hundreds of options, right? It is not going to narrow your search parameters. It is not going to help you figure out what you need. And that creates problems, right? That creates this confusion and uncertainty about that the product that I'm choosing is actually going to work for the individual or the issue that I'm looking for. So that is one of the major problems, is that this term ergonomic shows up on everything. It makes it really difficult to figure out what actually is going to be a good fit. My second problem is who decides what is ergonomic, right? That there is currently no standardization or regulation of any kind on this term. So again, just on Staples, when I was getting ready for the webinar, I searched the term ergonomic keyboard, and then a whole list of things comes up. But I scrolled through, and I actually sorted by cheapest to most expensive out of curiosity, assuming expensive ones probably have all kinds of fancy ergonomic features. But this is one of the ones that was on the less expensive scale. It's just a standard keyboard from Staples, right? It's their brand. I think it was about $15, maybe $15 or $18. And I pulled this one specifically because I thought this point was really interesting. Who decides what is ergonomic, quote unquote? This one claims to have adjustable tilt legs for improved ergonomics. Can anybody sort of point out what the issue is with that statement? What is the problem with adjustable tilt legs on a keyboard? Why don't I necessarily want that? Or how does that not improve my ergonomics, I guess is the question. That's right. So the response here I've gotten first is, where would the legs be? The wrong tilt is bad. And that's essentially my response too. If I had to guess, I mean, I could be wrong here, but if I had to guess, I would say that this keyboard probably has the legs or the feet of the keyboard at the back up by the function keys, and it probably has 2 levels. That's probably what they mean by adjustable tilt. There's probably a little short one, and there's probably a tall one, or there's none, right? You can fold them flat, or you can get a short stand or a bigger kickstand. All of those things would angle the keyboard essentially up. The back edge of the keyboard would be up, which creates a bent wrist posture. Right now, your wrists when you're typing are bent upwards, right? They're not probably at the back, right? Which is really, or they're not probably at the front, they're probably at the back, which is problematic. So that quote unquote adjustable tilt, right, might actually be a bad thing in an ergonomic world, not a good thing. But there is no regulation that is going to limit whoever is marketing this product from putting that on there, right? It's probably not, if it was at the front, if they were at the front edge and it tilted the front edge of the keyboard up, then that might be of benefit, because that does allow for a more relaxed or neutral wrist posture for some folks, right? But ultimately, right now, in its current position, if they're at the back, it is actually not good for ergonomics. But the adjustable tilt doesn't matter. What I would want in this case would be a flat keyboard. And so the legs are irrelevant because I don't want them, right? I prefer that they weren't even there. The only time I recommend adjustable tilt, like a tilt from the back edge up, is if someone is your like hunt and tech typist, right? That they are looking at every key, they don't know where the keys are, they're looking at their keyboard, not at the screen. Those people aren't fast, they're not doing high amounts of repetition usually, and they need to look down, right? So in that case, I don't mind popping the keyboard up for them. But for every other person, which is like at this stage in our life and in computer world, we're talking about 98% of the people I see, adjustable tilt legs at the back are not helpful. right? So who decides what is ergonomic? Who decides that that is an ergonomic feature that they want to advertise or market? And the short answer is that a marketing company decides that, right? That's putting ergonomics on that keyboard is going to make someone buy that product, right? Because they see the word ergonomics, they think it's going to be helpful or useful to them, and therefore they're more likely to pick that up, right? Even though I wouldn't actually recommend it. There is no regulation, no standard on this term. So problem number one is that tons of stuff has the word ergonomic on it. Problem number two is that nobody has any regulation or any input really on what this term ergonomic means. So it gets thrown around a lot with no kind of understanding of what that actually means, which makes it very confusing for the consumer. Problem number three is that every person body part injury is different. So it is not a one-size-fits-all system, right? One product does not solve all issues. And that is something I hear a lot from clients. They're like, okay, we want to make sure that we get the right, the best chair, right? I want to order one chair for everyone. I want to make sure that it fits as many people as possible or everyone in the workplace, and it makes life really complicated. The comment from someone, it just from the last slide, says that the guy who doesn't type for a living decides what is ergonomic and not, and that is probably quite true. So our third problem, again, is that one product cannot solve all issues, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all system, right? That it isn't a bad starting point, and in any case, anybody who's setting up an office, if you're doing a renovation, you're doing something that's new, you're going to be looking to order 100 chairs. You're not going to order an individual chair for everybody, right? That's just the reality, is that you're going to choose a chair, you're going to place an order for a bulk selection because you get the best price, because it's simpler, it all arrives at the same time, it all looks consistent. Like, there are lots of advantages to doing that way, and we understand that. But what ends up happening is that the product doesn't fit everyone. It can't, right? So when you're looking at chairs, there are petite seats, there are standard seats, there are large seats, there are seats that have that are standard in size, like width-wise, but are longer for people who have longer legs. There are armrests that go taller and shorter. There are backrests that have additional features. There's a million different options on a chair. And the reason is that the standard chair doesn't fit everybody. It fits a significant percentage of the population, but it doesn't fit everyone, right? And that sort of gets even compounded when you have someone who has a unique injury. Now, the equipment that once did fit them pretty well is now not working for them because they have an injury that is creating problems, right? It's changing the way they need to engage with their workstation. So I can't answer that question, right? That's one of the challenges I find with office ergonomics, is that it's amazing. There's tons of product out there. We can always find stuff that helps any employee that I see. I can always find a product that works. However, I can't say that this is the best keyboard and this is the best mouse and this is the best chair and this is what you should order, because every person's body size and shape, every injury they have is unique and is going to change how they use their workstation. I actually didn't put it up there, but one of the other factors is how they engage with their workstation, what type of work they do, right? So one of the things, for example, we see a lot is that everybody needs a keyboard tray, right? So everybody in the workplace gets a keyboard tray, which is great, right? It does give a really nice flexibility, allows everybody to adjust the workstation to their individual size and shape, or most people to adjust it to their individual size and shape. So folks like myself who are quite short, I'm only 5'2", I sit at a very short desk, I need that keyboard to go down low, right? And so that's great. A keyboard tray allows me to do that. But it's that same person then has to do a lot of work on their desktop, right? So if am I 5'2", I sit with the keyboard tray, let's say 4 inches below my desk height, which is pretty reasonable, to be honest, for someone my height, right? So I sit with it 4 inches below my desk, but I do a lot of paperwork. So now my problem becomes that my paperwork, like my working height, my paperwork is 4 inches higher than my keyboard, right? And that creates a really interesting discrepancy that may not work for me. If I do occasional paperwork, probably not an issue. If I spend 2 hours of my day working on actual physical paperwork, reading, writing notes, making edits on actual hard copy documents, now my workstation's really not working for me because I've created this really big discrepancy. I fit everything for my computer, but there's a lot of other stuff going on there too that doesn't necessarily fit. So even a product like a keyboard tray, which you think might really make it very flexible, doesn't work for everybody, right? There are some people that it does not work for, right? So those are our three main problems. Ergonomics on everything. No one regulates who puts that word on things, so you have to really understand what it means and think it through, because it doesn't mean anything in some cases. And then one product cannot solve all issues. So I can't give you a list and say these are the best 5 products to choose from, because it doesn't quite work that way. So my goal today is to talk a little bit about becoming an educated consumer, because that's really what you need to be in order to navigate through this world of ergonomic products or equipment. You really need to become educated about what the products are, how to use them, what helps. You basically need to ask a bunch of really great questions, right? And evaluate the products yourself, because whatever some marketing guru has claimed online does not necessarily mean anything about whether it's ergonomic or not. So you need to use your judgment and your understanding to be able to apply that content, right? To apply your understanding of what ergonomics means, to understand better what these products will actually do for you or for your staff. So I've got a few questions that I want you to sort of ask yourself as we go through about how we determine or evaluate these products. So first question for you is, how is this product unique, right? Something that is, I mean, even a standard keyboard, I'm going to use keyboards all through this section because there's a whole bunch of different options, but even a standard keyboard has some ergonomic quote unquote features, but there are a lot of different keyboard layouts out there. And I've given you 4 examples here. The top one is sort of a standard wave style keyboard. The one on the right is a keyboard without a number pad. It's actually a bit of a compact, it's a bit smaller size, but it doesn't have a number pad. Bottom left has a number pad, but it's on the left-hand side, not the right. And then the bottom right is a split keyboard, kind of like the one on the top left, but it doesn't have a number pad. The number pad is actually a separate piece that you can add into that setup. So each product here is unique. They each have a different benefit or a different purpose, right? Number pad, no number pad. Number pad on the right, number pad on the left. Split, no split. The 2 split keyboards, both are also raised a little bit in the center, which changes your elbow posture, for example, right? So each one of these keyboards has some unique features, which may benefit certain individuals and be actually a drawback for other individuals. Not all these keyboards fit well for everyone. The first question you always want to ask yourself when you're looking at any product is, how is this product unique, right? So when you're looking at any mouse, any keyboard, any chair, what makes this product unique or different, right? Because it says ergonomic, so what the heck does that mean? And the first question is, well, what makes it different than standard? And then you can start to figure out, well, that's actually a good fit for what you need or not. So next question is, how will this uniqueness, whatever item is that makes it unique, how will this change the way the user interacts with the equipment? Right, so I pulled 2 examples from the previous slide. So that wave style keyboard you saw in the first one, this is probably I would describe this as the first keyboard. That's probably not the best description. When people ask me for an ergonomic keyboard, right, when I go to do an office assessment and someone says, I was at my doctor's office, they recommended I get an ergonomic keyboard, this 99% of the time, this is what they are talking about. They're talking about a wave style keyboard like this. It was one of the first sort of more unique keyboards that are on the market. It is still widely used and accepted, and as a result, it still sort of carries that term as being the ergonomic keyboard, when really there are some pros and cons to this one, and there are a lot of other ergonomic quote-unquote keyboards on the market as well. So the wave style keyboard, how does it change how the user interacts? So it's got the wave, it's a little taller in the center, it splits in the middle and sort of creates some empty space between your fingers, right? So ultimately, it changes the forearm and the elbow angle. And so instead of going at your keyboard straight, which if you actually look at, you can see that your wrist, if you actually look at your sort of standard keyboard, your wrist would bend slightly out to type on a straight keyboard, because your shoulders have to roll in a little bit in order to type in that sort of straight position. So it allows you to come at it from a more natural angle, straight from your elbows, which are at the side of your body, coming in towards the midline of your body. So it changes the forearm or the elbow angle. It also has quite a wide profile. So it can be really good for people who have larger shoulders, right? Wider shoulders can be a good fit for this keyboard, but it isn't necessarily, sort of the flip side of that is that it's not necessarily good for a petite individual, right? That it is when you get one of these keyboards, it is big. It is quite a bit bigger than I think maybe everyone realizes. And so people who are petite sometimes find this keyboard is too large for them, that it creates a lot of awkward reaching and things to get to your mouse specifically, right? Because it's so big, because of the split in the center, it actually is quite wide. It's wider than a standard keyboard because it creates that dead space in the middle. And what ends up happening is that you have to reach a lot further to your mouse. So it has some pros, right? It's going to positively, potentially, depending on how big you are, it's going to positively impact the way you engage with your computer keyboard, but it also has some potential negatives, right? So it's going to change the way you interact with your keyboard. It's also going to have an impact with the way you interact with your mouse, right? So that is something else to consider, is not only does it change how you interact with this piece of equipment, but all the other stuff at your workstation too. It also doesn't, another drawback potentially is that it doesn't always fit very well on a keyboard tray, depending on how big and deep your keyboard tray is. The other one I picked to evaluate here is the Evoluent left-handed keyboard, and they have different names. It used to be called left-handed. I think it's now called a mouse-friendly keyboard. It may have changed names again, but essentially the point here is that it moves the number pad to the left-hand side, which ultimately allows you to move your mouse closer to the keyboard, right? So a normal keyboard has the number pad on the right-hand side. So you sit in front of your sort of middle of your space bar, you reach over your number pad to get to your mouse, and that creates some awkward reaching to get to your mouse. So people who have right shoulder pain, for example, maybe not a great option because they're reaching a lot more to get to their mouse. Well, if you take that number pad, you put it on the left-hand side, all of a sudden your mouse can come probably 3 or 4 inches closer to your body, which is likely more in line with your natural shoulder position. So it typically improves right shoulder posture if you are a right-hand mouser. Drawback to this, if you are a left-hand mouser, this is not helpful at all because now it's going to increase the reaching to the left-hand mouse, right? So you need to think about how the unique elements of each item that you're considering will change the interaction the user has with their workstation and their equipment. Okay, so question 1 is what's unique about it. Question 2 is how will it change how the user interacts with their equipment and their workstation. Question 3 then becomes, what discomfort will this product help? Because each of them does help, right? Depending on what your issue is or what your discomfort is. So that sort of wave style standard, what people consider their ergonomic keyboard, is definitely a good thing for people who have like tennis elbow, right? Forearm, elbow discomfort. It can be a positive product. Some people really like that. And people who are wide shoulders may even find some relief from improved shoulder postures to be using this keyboard just because it is bigger. And so it allows them to get their hands and their shoulders sort of more in line in their natural position. So primarily people who are having sort of tennis elbow, forearm, elbow discomfort, this might be a good fit for them, right? Usually we're talking about bilateral discomfort, right? Somebody who has right shoulder discomfort, this isn't a good fit, right? Or even right elbow discomfort, this might not be a great fit because it is going to increase reaching to the mouse. So that might be help one way, help with typing, make mousing worse, right? So we want to think about all those things, right? Forearm, elbow discomfort, this can be a good fit for them. The one on the bottom can improve right shoulder discomfort if you're a right-hand mouser because it moves the mouse a lot closer to the body. If we think mousing is one of the main issues at the workstation, or the mouse position is one of the main issues at the workstation, then it reduces the reach, brings it closer, and therefore will potentially help the product, help that discomfort, sorry. So those are sort of 3 basic questions. The final question you always want to ask are there any drawbacks, right? Because there often are. So I pulled that example that we've been talking about, right? There is potential drawbacks, not for everyone, but for some folks, the wave style keyboard doesn't work, right? We talked about this. It doesn't fit on every keyboard tray. It's too wide for some smaller people, and the increased reach to the mouse on the right-hand side. None of those are good things for certain individuals, right? It might be great for some people. It might be terrible for others. Right? So you need to think about what makes it unique, what kind of how does that improve how the user interacts, what is the what is the discomfort it's going to help, and then are there any negatives or drawbacks here? So let's do a couple case studies to see if we can work our way through some of these examples. So the first one I want to talk about is questions we get all the time about sit-stand workstations, right? What we actually hear often is, okay, we need a sit-stand workstation, but we don't want to pay to have an ergonomic assessment done. Can you just give us the best sit-stand workstation that you'd recommend? It's not that simple, unfortunately, right? Like everything else, every other product we talked about today, one size does not fit all, right? So I need to know more about the individual and the person in order to better understand it. So let's talk about this sit-stand workstation. There are lots of them on the market. This one sits on the desktop. When you drop it down, the sort of keyboard platform goes flush with the desk, or very nearly, and then the monitors go on that lighter gray area that you can see on the top. So what makes this product unique compared to a sort of a standard desk? We'll start with that. So I'm looking for your input here. What makes this product unique? Okay, awesome. Basic answer is that obviously it allows you to stand at your workstation, right? So that's a good thing. So it allows us to stand, moves up and down. Yep, yeah, it's pretty simple to adjust, right? But ultimately, it moves up and down, allows you to stand at your workstation. I know that everybody here has already heard, it's almost becoming tiring now, but the idea that sitting's the new smoking, sitting's killing us, we need to stand and move more at work, right? So we know that this product can maybe help us do that. In fact, it can help us do that. It will help us stand more frequently, allow us to stand more frequently. So what kind of injury would you recommend this product for? Because I'm going to say most workplaces are not just giving everyone a sit-stand workstation. So what kind of injury would you consider this for? Yeah, we're looking at, I've got 2 or 3 answers here, but they're all essentially the same. We're looking at people who can't sit, or people who have a lower back injury, right? That they have some sort of, chronic lower back injuries, people who can't sit, absolutely. That they, for whatever reason, they have an injury that is going to primarily require them to stand at least for some portions of their day. In addition to an injury, I can never say that a sit-stand workstation isn't going to help someone, right? That's sort of one of the issues with sit-stand in general, is that we've heard all the research, we've read all the research, we've seen all the sensational headlines. Sitting is not great for us for long periods of time. So standing for portions of our workday is helpful, right? It can be helpful. The jury is still out on how frequently people actually use these pieces of equipment. But if you have somebody who is actually yeah, thank you. Derek's jumping ahead to my next question. But when you look at what injury is this ideal for, lower back, people who can't stand or can't sit for long periods of time, absolutely. So benefits obviously is that I can stand, right? I can always say that it's a good thing for people to be able to move throughout their day, create more variety. What are the drawbacks? I've got one here, and anybody else got one to throw on my list? Okay, awesome. So everybody's kind of on the same page here. Fabulous, fabulous. Okay, all right. So the most of the responses here are sort of in the same vein, which is that the keyboard on this does not actually go lower than the desk, right? When the keyboard drops down to desk, drops down, right? When you lower this to its quote unquote seated position, what you get is a keyboard that is still on the desktop. For myself, which is the example somebody gave me here, is that I'm only 5'2", and I need to work my desk. I don't even know how tall it is, 24 inches, 25 inches. It's height adjustable, so I've got it quite low. And most standard desks are about 30 inches, 29 or 30 inches, give or take. It's somewhere in that range. Almost every desk I meet is 29 to 30 inches high in a workstation. So a sit stand like this, for someone who is only 5'2", that keyboard is still on the desktop. So although it allows me to stand, which is great, and when I stand, I can probably achieve the perfect working height, but when I sit, I can't, right? Because the desk is too high for me anyways, and now I'm actually adding a little bit of height because it's got a bit of a platform where that keyboard goes, right? So it does not actually allow me to stand, or to sit comfortably, right? I can't type in the right position in this case. So it is a benefit and then it allows me to stand, but the major drawback here is that you may have to be fairly tall to use this. There are lots of people I meet who should not work on the desktop, that 29 inches is too tall for them. And so in that case, this is actually going to compound the problem and not, it might help low back discomfort, but you're likely going to create, shoulder discomfort, for example, because the person is now working quite a bit too high and can't consistently use it. Just skimming through here, I got lots of answers to my questions. So the other point a lot of people have made here is that it doesn't go, lack of usage is a key problem here, right? That there is a lot of research recently that is suggesting that not everyone can actually use this, that not everyone actually uses it the way that they should. So some people stand, some people will stand the entire shift, for example, so they will just go to standing and they'll get busy doing something and they'll never sit. And that's not great either, because now we have some issues with blood pooling in our feet and those kind of things, and that essentially we're not varying our posture. So it's hard to stand all day, it's hard to sit all day. Neither one of them is really great for our body. Our body's built to move, right? So we want to adjust regularly, and that can be tricky to get people to do. So that can be a drawback, is that we don't have that benefit. Question here is, do they make a desk that will go below standard height? And they do. There are different options, including this company. Ergotron makes different versions of their sit-stand unit. This is one that sits on the desk. It actually fully sits on the desk. So one of the questions was about leg room, and the leg room here is actually not an issue because it goes right on top of your desk. So if you have enough leg room to get underneath your desk, you can just sit, you just plop this one on top of your desktop and your leg room has not changed. They do make a version where the keyboard tray actually goes, it sits lower than the monitors by quite a bit, and you can lower that down to below the desk height. But there are some drawbacks to that one too. One of the major issues is that for that, I'm going to call these desk add-on units, right, where you have your standard desk and you put something on top of it. All of these desk add-on units, if the keyboard tray goes below the desk, it doesn't tuck in, right? You can't, like a normal keyboard tray, you can slide under the desk so that you can move forwards and work on the desktop when you're doing paperwork, right? I haven't yet met one of these desk add-on units that allows you to do that. It's not designed to have the keyboard tray portion pivot and slide underneath the desk, right? So what you get is a keyboard tray that sits out always about 8 to 10 inches from the edge of your desk. So if you are someone who does a lot of paperwork, you can be pushed back a long way, and that doesn't always work very well. So it does work for some people. I do recommend desk add-on units. They tend to be a little cheaper than a fully height adjustable desk, but there are some companies doing some different things now that not completely comparable, but for an extra $100, an extra couple $100, you can get something that has even more flexibility. Like the whole desk will go up and down, and those kinds of products are coming down a little bit in price. So these work great for some people, really don't work well for other people, right? So the benefits can outweigh the pitfalls, the drawbacks, but it can also be the other way around. For me, this would be a major problem, right? Not bad because my desk is super short, but if I was working on a 29-inch desk and then I added this on top, right, and then I tried to work on that, I would be addressing my back discomfort if I had that by allowing myself to stand more frequently, but I would be creating shoulder problems, and that's definitely not our goal here, right? We want to look at the holistic picture, right? So we improve the workstation for everyone. Another point is that some of these don't go high enough for everybody, right? That yes, for the average individual it does, but for somebody who is 6'4", 6'5", this kind of a desk add-on probably doesn't go high enough for when they're standing, right? It's actually too small, right? So that can be a problem. So the product is unique. Just a quick recap, unique because it allows us to stand while we're at our workstation, which is great. Probably going to help lower back injuries, people who have some issues with their lower body, lower limbs, they need to move more. That all can be really helpful. Obviously, standing is a benefit because it allows us to rotate posture, but there are potential drawbacks depending on the size and shape of the individual that you're giving this product to, right? So you need to be mindful of that. Even a sit-stand unit is not a one-size-fits-all. We have to make sure that it fits properly and addresses the usage needs of the individual that we're giving it to. Okay, so that's one of our case studies. The other product case study is a trackball mouse. This style of mouse has been around for a long time, right? It was, again, one of the first unique mice on the market. Now there are all kinds of different options, but I would say this one was sort of the original, not necessarily this product, but this style was the original sort of one on the market that would be sort of a different kind of mouse. So give me the basics. What is ultimately what makes this unique? Ha ha ha. Yes, I agree. Amanda says, ha ha ha, the trackball makes it unique. And that obviously is true. It's pretty straightforward. If you've never seen or used one of these mice, is that when you roll your fingers over that big ball at the top, the trackball, that is what actually adjusts the mouse, the cursor on your screen. So what ultimately is the benefit of this is that it doesn't move. This mouse, normally when you grab a mouse, you move a mouse around, right? That's what you do in order to move the cursor. This mouse doesn't move. It just sits on your desk. It stays stationary at all times, and it never moves. Whereas a traditional mouse would move around a lot, right? So injuries that it's ideal for, I'm getting some responses already here, but injuries that it's ideal for, the unique part is kind of what points to the right kind of injury. It is a great mouse for someone who has right shoulder issues, right? If you can get them into a good shoulder posture, maybe by getting a different keyboard so that their mouse can be nice and tight to their body, and then you tell them that they don't have to move their shoulder anymore because your mouse is going to stay still on your desk or your keyboard tray, right? All of a sudden they don't move, and therefore your right shoulder is not immobilized, but it's certainly the movement there is limited, which gives it the recovery time it needs from any type of injury that you've had to it. So it is, so the unique part is the trackball, but what it allows because of that is that it stops the movement on the desk and allows people to essentially minimize shoulder movement. Okay, so that's really going to impact shoulder discomfort, and that's really the only time I recommend this mouse. This mouse is when somebody has shoulder discomfort and I want them to not have to move their shoulder nearly as much. Okay, so what is some of the other drawbacks? Okay, I got some good answers here. Any others? Let me throw a couple more in there. What other drawbacks here? Awesome. Okay, so good answers. I like these. Okay, so some drawbacks are that you don't move your shoulder, so you have to move something in order to move the cursor on the screen. So what you actually do is you change the movement from your, when you mouse, you should use your shoulder, your elbow, your hand, and your wrist. Essentially your whole upper limb, your right limb or left, depending on what you mouse on, should be used to move that cursor, move the mouse around, move the cursor on the screen, right? Because it balances everything out. If you have a shoulder injury and you go to this style of mouse, your shoulder is no longer doing the work, right? So the work gets transferred to other areas of the body. It's a little bit more minimal because you don't actually move the mouse. You're just going to roll that ball, and it does sort of roll quite freely. But I agree. One of the drawbacks potentially is that you may move or change the load of mousing to some of the smaller muscle groups of your fingers, your wrists, in your hand, right? Which is not ideal. This mouse can have a big learning curve, right? It's quite different than a normal mouse. So it does take sometimes a long time to learn, and you can still use it quite poorly, right? Just because it's a trackball and it's not meant to move doesn't mean that you can't move it. You can still, and some people do, which isn't ideal, and it can take a long time to learn. And precision, I agree, can be a bit challenging, especially at first. It can be hard to learn to use it. Probably the biggest drawback that I see most frequently that hasn't been mentioned yet is that it can be is that it's tall. This mouse tends to be trackballs in general tend to be quite a bit taller than a standard mouse. Just the way that they are designed, you're kind of working on an upward angle there. And so what ultimately means is that some people find that creates an awkward wrist posture. And some of these are very large in terms of their width. Yes, so Derek just added in size is a factor here. I totally agree. Size is a major issue for people with small hands. So what we recommend these sort of, if you're very petite, this style of mouse can be a problem. because it is quite a bit larger. It creates a wider hand span and isn't unnecessarily an ideal position. So it can be tricky. Yeah, and you can also work to learn to use those buttons on the side of the trackball. That can help, but can also be, again, a drawback depending on how quickly you learn. So it has some unique features. It is a product that does work really well for certain very specific shoulder type injuries, but there are some potential drawbacks you need to be mindful of as well, right? So again, goes to show there is good things about this mouse. There are also some bad things about this mouse, right? That depending on the type of injury, discomfort, usage you have, you may find that this is actually not a good fit for you, right? If you have to be really precise, if you're small, if you have small hands, if you have hand-wrist issues on top of shoulder issues, this is not the mouse for you, right? But it can be if you specifically have right shoulder discomfort. We're trying to neutralize that shoulder movement. So this is where you need to really do a good job of asking yourself those questions, right? What's unique about it? Why would I, how does it impact or change the way the user engages? What injury is it ideal for? And then what are the benefits and potential drawbacks? And we need to consider all those factors to figure out what is the right product for any given injury, right? And I would say that this is the #1 reason people call us to do an office assessment, is that it's not rocket science. They know that somebody has shoulder discomfort, right? Like, they're not calling me and saying, I have no idea what's wrong with this person. They're saying, you know what, this employee has had shoulder discomfort. It's been ongoing for a while. We really need to address it, but we don't know where to start, right? And that is probably the #1 reason that people call us to do an office assessment, right? Is that they understand the basics, but they have no idea what product to choose to address the discomfort this person's having. In some cases, the assessment's very complicated, right? And then it makes perfect sense to have somebody get in there and do something more comprehensive, because just changing the mouse or just changing the keyboard isn't going to address the problem, right? But in other cases, it's as simple as, wow, just get a keyboard tray, right? It's as simple as that, right? But our clients still don't always know how to evaluate, or having a hard time figuring out how to evaluate the products that are out there and get the right equipment for the job, right? So there's reasons why it's complicated. We've already outlined those, some of the major problems, but that is sort of the main crux of the issue, I think, is that there's just so much out there. It's hard to figure out what's good, bad, and ugly. Oh, okay. And this person says they actually use a different trackball mouse from Kensington, same company here, where the trackball is down from the palm. And there are a couple out there like that, where the trackball is a little bit lower than your palm, which is cool, because that means that the height of it is less relevant, right? That the height in this case would allow you to work with a nice neutral wrist posture. And trackballs some people love them. And there's trackballs that also go in the thumb, not just in the fingers. So it really depends on the type of product you like. All right. So what I want to highlight is that if you're still stuck, right? Like I said, we get a lot of clients with questions about what product. That's why primarily we get hired to do office ergonomic assessments. And that's really what they're looking for, is they don't want to trial different things and guess at stuff. They want to just get it right the first time. And that's really what an office ergonomic assessment does for you, is that our job is to come in, evaluate sort of the issues, figure out what products and equipment we think are going to work best for the issues that are there, and then help you purchase the right product the first time without any guesswork, right? And that's really what our clients are typically asking us to do. And anybody that works with us on any kind of regular basis has the option, or is sort of entered into this what my one client calls it, the coffee card discount. But essentially, that we appreciate sort of ongoing business from clients. So if you have regular office assessments that you are looking to do, we often will put you on sort of a program like this, where that if you complete 10 office assessments, you would get the 11th free, looking at kind of like getting a 10% discount if you use us quite regularly. So there is ways that we can help to make this a little bit cheaper so that you can get it right the first time. But obviously, an office ergonomic assessment is going to help you make sure that you get the equipment you need when you need it without any guesswork involved. So if you still feel lost, then start to consider an office ergonomic assessment. You may even find that over time you get more confident or more comfortable doing these on your own, or you start to get an understanding of the kinds of products we often recommend for these issues, and you may be able to take it over yourself. But it is a good option if you're struggling, or if you have something complex, to start to look at office ergonomics assessments from an outside company, right? So that's something that we do help provide, and if you are interested in that, we can get you connected to this sort of quote unquote coffee card discount program, all right? But looking at about a 10% discount if you do any kind of volume with us. So that's something to consider if you're looking at office ergonomic assessments in your future. But in the meantime, I've got about 5 minutes to go here before 10:30, so I wanted to open this up to any questions that anybody might have this morning. I can see a couple people are typing here, so I'm going to give a second. Okay, awesome. First question is back to those sit-stand workstations. There are all kinds of different options. I mentioned earlier, they're asking about the product that that isn't a desk add-on, right? I said, so there are some companies out there that are sort of making some new different versions. One of the ones we've been working with a lot lately, there's a couple different companies that make them, but the one that we've been recommending most frequently just lately is actually by Ergocentric, and it is it's called UpCentric, but also ultimately what it is a desk base. It's not it can be a top, you can add a top to it, but what a lot of our clients are finding right now is that the desk add-ons are great, but they have some limitations and they do impact things. And so a simpler version is to have your whole desk go up and down, or a better option, and it creates, there are some significant positives to that. So what we're finding is that some of our clients are really looking for some different options. The UpCentric is essentially a base, either a 2-leg or a 3-leg base that gets added to your existing workstation. So if your workstation is a cubicle, but it just sort of hooks onto the wall and can be detached, you can keep the exact same aesthetic, right? Because you're going to use the same desktop that's already at your workstation, and you're just going to give it height adjustable legs. And so you detach it from the wall, you attach it to this height adjustable base. It looks the same thing, and it can be quite interesting as an option, just because it creates a really nice aesthetic, very consistent look. So you don't lose that in your office. It's also really adjustable, so it gives you a nice range, and it's more expensive but not crazy in comparison to some of these sit-stand units, which are actually still quite expensive in some cases. A couple questions, other questions popping in here are, how do you determine who's suitable for a sit-stand workstation? I feel like anyone can get a doctor's note. I don't think that necessarily means they need a sit-stand workstation. It can be costly in a large organization. This is coming from one of the community colleges, and I totally get that. We can do a whole webinar on this. I will give you the quick and dirty answer, which is ultimately, how do you determine who's suited for a sit-stand workstation? You're right. Anyone can get a doctor's note for anything. We know that in this day and age, right? So what a lot of our clients are taking a different approach. So the 2 or 3 that we do really regular office assessments for are requiring a doctor's note. So in order to get a sit-stand workstation, they have hundreds of people. There's 1,000 plus people at one organization. They cannot just buy 1,000 sit-stand workstations. It's logistically impossible. So they say you must have a doctor's note, and the doctor's note does not immediately mean you get a sit-stand workstation. What the doctor's note means is that you get a ergonomic assessment. And that's essentially the step that they've taken. They've added that layer to it. So once you get a doctor's note that says you need to stand or you need to sit stand, whatever it says, then they have an ergonomist come in, one of our team come in and evaluate that person's workstation and agree or disagree. Because I will be honest, there are times that I disagree, right? A doctor has never seen the workstation. They have very limited knowledge about what that employee does, how much movement they already have in the day. Like I saw someone a couple months ago, and when I talked to her, she was not at her desk for more than 30% of her day, probably closing in on 40% of her day on average. A sit-stand desk for her is not that helpful, because when she's out of her office, she's actually doing site visits and other things. So she is often up, walking around, moving. She's already getting the movement in her day that she would need. What she needed was a chair that actually fit her, because her chair was terrible, right? So when it came down to it, I actually had a doctor's note that said she needs a sit-stand workstation, and my professional opinion was different. right? But when I actually went in and properly evaluated her workstation and her usage habits, ultimately I said, I don't think she needs a sit-stand workstation. I think she needs a new chair that works best for her. Here's what I would recommend. And in the end, they replaced her chair and never got her a sit-stand because it wasn't the right fit, and she's fine, right? So that's what a lot of our clients that are doing regular assessments are doing, is they're asking for a doctor's note, which prompts an ergonomic assessment, essentially. Because you'd be surprised the number of times I get a doctor's note that says they need sit-stand, and I actually don't recommend it. So that's a quick and dirty answer. Okay, next question is, can I address kneeling computer chairs? Would you recommend them? This is interesting. I didn't mention it, but when I typed in ergonomic, no problem, Darren. When I typed in ergonomic on the Staples website, out of the top 10 or 15, whatever shows up on my homepage, there were 3 kneeling chairs. So clearly this is something that the ergonomic term is directly applied to this. If you've never seen one, you essentially you kneel on it and you kind of perch back. You should just do a quick Google search to see what a kneeling chair looks like. Typically, we don't recommend them. I would say in my 15 years of doing assessments, I have recommended a kneeling chair exactly once, and it was because the person had already trialed it. Somebody else in the office had one. She'd used it. She had found significant relief from her discomfort with it. It is not a common chair that I would recommend. It's pretty rare. Like I said, once in 15 years of doing this. I think my colleagues would say the same. So it's a tricky one to recommend. It has some benefits. It can take some pressure off the low back, and obviously it significantly changes your posture when you're kneeling and not sitting. But you also have the potential to sit very poorly in it, right? You can still have a really terrible back posture in a kneeling chair. So it can create more problems than it solves. It also can be a trip hazard. You get better at it, but they're not the easiest thing to get in and out of. So you have to kind of tuck your legs in. So it's not always something that people are very good at. So ultimately, I don't recommend them very often. I'm not going to say I never have, but it's very rare that I would consider that to be a good ergonomic option. I think a fully adjustable chair that actually fits you is always a better option. Okay, so that's all the questions that I have for today. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in doing office ergonomic assessments with us, please let me know. We're happy to get you connected to that sort of coffee card style discount that if you are going to do with any regular number of assessments, we can definitely help sort of manage the cost a little bit. But don't hesitate to give us a call, even with questions. We're happy to answer questions. Like I said, I've had 3 or 4 this week from clients and contacts that are trying to figure out what product is the right fit. Sometimes I can help you out in a simple email. Sometimes I would tell you, and I really can't answer this without seeing the individual, I'd recommend an office assessment, but we do our best to help at any time. So thank you very much. We'll send you an email when all of our rest of our webinars are up online, and we look forward to connecting with all of you in the future. Have a great day, everyone, and hopefully your office ergonomics program is off to the right start in 2018.